Crazy berserker. I killed it, it's murder. Go crazy berserker.
Hello, what's up everyone, hope you're all doing well. So we are going to begin, as usual, like 90% of my looks hide our eyebrows. So I'm using a glue stick for this, and you want to get them as flat and as smooth as possible. Next, I'm grabbing the Kryolan supracolor in white, which is like an oil paint, and I'm just using my fingers and I'm just going to apply this all over my face. You can use a blender as well, and you just want to get the white as even as possible. Next, I'm grabbing the Nyx Fx Setting Powder, or just any setting powder that you may have. I'm just going to go ahead and set that. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's going to be easier to apply some water-based paints later on. Next, I'm now grabbing some black. I'm using the Bennye MagiCakes, and this one's in licorice black, basically a black. I'm just going to grab a fine brush and start creating the shape of the brows. So I'm just beginning with a really fine line, and then I'm just going to really build up the structure and the shape. Of course, do both of them and try and get them as even as possible. And to describe the shapes of the brows, they are really heightened and almost angry looking in comparison to my natural brows. Okay, so even though the face isn't actually fully done yet, I've moved on to the neck and chest. So grabbing some red, this time I'm using the Bright Red by Bennye. I'm just going to start creating the shape of the bow. Now you can grab a pencil and sketch out the shapes first if you want to, that's absolutely fine. But I just decided to go straight in and just wing it as I went along. So we are not worrying about details or anything like that at this point just yet, we're just getting the base colours down, the very basic shapes. And then grabbing some white, I'm just going to create the collar area and like the shirt that's inside the suit. Next, I'm now grabbing some black and I'm just going to create the shape of the collar. And then with a wide brush, I'm just going to fill in the rest of my chest. This time I'm taking a fine brush and I'm just going to fill in the rest of the collar, leaving out the edges. This is just so I can tell apart the black background and the collar, and will help me in the next few steps to define the shape of the collar. Next, I'm going to grab some white. I think this time I'm actually using the Kryolan supracolor, which is the oil-based paint, and I'm just grabbing a brush with a flat head. The shape of the brush is really going to help me, and I'm just using the flat end to define the edges and really sharpen up the collar. This is also going to create highlights, and I'm swiping inwards, so I'm not making the edge too much of just a sharp line. I'm kind of diffusing out the colour, if that makes sense. Moving on, taking the same product and the brush, I'm just going to kind of like dry brush the surface of the rest of the body. So I'm basically creating highlights and giving the entire piece some more realism, because in reality, if you were wearing a black jacket, it wouldn't just be like pure 100% black. There's going to be reflections, shines and highlights. So this is what we are trying to replicate here. So when I say dry brush, what I mean is we're just going to tickle the surface of your chest. We're not going to go too heavy, and you're only going to apply a very small amount of product each time. So if it helps, you can grab some and pick up some product and then wipe it on a piece of tissue or something like that, and then you can also go in with your fingers and pat it away to diffuse the colour even more. So I'm not just placing the white anywhere on the jacket, I'm thinking about where the seams would be. Like for an example, where the arms are or the shoulders, this is kind of like sewn onto the jacket, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of creating a separate section, which is why I've kind of created like a vertical line. So just think about a jacket and think about how it's made and try and replicate that as much as you can. So next, grabbing some black and a fine brush, I'm just going to start outlining the shapes now. So as you can see, I've already outlined the bow and parts of the collar, and then I'm creating a line in the center area, and this is going to create the shirt. I'm creating a circle, which is going to be a button, and then once you're happy with that, you can then go in and start adding some shadow. So you can either use like the Kryolan supracolor in black, which is like a black oil paint, or you can use some black eyeshadow as well. I'm just going to start adding shadows to where the shadow would hit. So for instance, the shirt in the center, you've got one side folded over another, so the side that is underneath is going to be the side that has the most shadow. So you want to create the illusion that it's actually 3D by doing this. So I'm adding the shadow mainly around the edges and concentrating underneath the bow as well. This is going to create the illusion that the bow is thick and actually popping out your skin or sitting on top of your skin. And you got to keep in mind that the shadow is going to be more intense as it goes towards the edge and is diffused away as it goes out. So again, you want to take your time and really build it up slowly. Don't add too much product at once. It's very easy to overdo this step. Sometimes less is more. Now I'm just taking a fine brush and I'm just kind of using the same technique again, but this time I'm just making more defined lines. This is going to create creases within the bow, and you want to use lots of flicking motions from inside to out. Moving on, now I'm going to grab some white. I'm using the same white that I was using earlier, and I'm just going to grab a brush and just add some highlights. So you want to think about where the light is going to hit and where the shadow is going to hit. So I'm really concentrating mainly on around the edges of some objects, so mainly the bow, and this is going to create the illusion that it's got a shiny surface as well, like made out of silk or something like that. Again, exactly the same, don't overdo this, a little goes a long way. Bouncing back onto the face, I'm going to grab some black eyeshadow, and I've gone for a really fine eyeshadow brush, and I'm starting to create, I don't even know what you'd call it, it's like these wrinkle things on his forehead. But again, a tiny amount of product goes a very long way, so just really gently swipe it on. This doesn't have to be too perfect at this point, and then once you're happy with the basic shapes that you've done, I'm then going in with a black and I'm really defining the edges. I've used a mixture of both greys and blacks as well, and as you can see, now that I've sort of built it up, it now looks a lot more 3D. For the lips, I'm going for a nice beautiful bright red. I'm using the NYX Suede for this, and I'm just going to apply it like I would on a normal day. Then using the same technique that I just did on my forehead, I'm going to do coming from the corners of my lips. This is going to create the illusion that it's separated and will make it a lot more 3D. So I'm drawing kind of like heavy black lines going down, and I'm really focusing the shadow only on the inside areas because you want to make it look like it's kind of like inside. Now I'm just adding shadow onto the center of the chin to create kind of like a cleft chin, I think they call it. And then moving on to the eyes, I'm grabbing the mesmerized contact lenses. Are you ready? Boom. I will leave exactly the contact lenses that I used in the description box below. Moving on to the eyes, I'm just going to grab some black eyeshadow and pack this onto my eyelids. I'm also applying this underneath my eyes as well. And you want to use lots of like circular motions to get a really nice soft blend. You don't want to look like a panda and have the edges so that they are really sharp circles. Then grabbing a defined small eyeshadow brush once again, I'm going in with a grey I think this time, so really gently you want to build up the shape of the nose. And then for the cheeks, I'm going in with a red paint and then taking a fine brush, and I'm going to start creating the swirls. So I'm starting off by creating them so that they're quite thin, and then I'm just going to really build up the thickness as I go along. And then going back in with my fine brush, I'm going to create and define the cheek areas. So that's touching the spiral areas, and this is going to head towards my nose and my eyes, almost. So I'm just using a fine brush to get the really basic shape down, and then I'm going in with a wider brush and I'm going to diffuse out the edges. And then going in with a very fine brush, I'm going to seriously define the shapes. And you just want to keep playing around until it looks almost 3D. I'm trying to create the illusion so that these cheeks are actually popping out my skin. Next, I'm just going to add this to the top of my forehead. This is going to create kind of like contour and just give it a bit more dimension, realism, and make it look almost slightly dirty. And then finally, I'm going to do the same thing onto the sides of my cheeks. Now, I know here I'm only doing this really lightly, but later on I actually packed the shadow on really heavily so that it looked like a completely different shape. So you want to go ahead and just really pack the eyeshadow on to create kind of like a V shape because his face isn't round. I feel like for this look in particular, this final step is absolutely important, that you do it quite heavy because this is going to seriously change the shape of the entire face. Thank you so much for watching my video. I really hope you enjoyed it and you found it helpful. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and also feel free to hit the subscribe button. Also don't forget I have an Instagram at gothspectrum, and finally I will see you next time.